Hello and welcome to the Roundtable. Today we have two experts in the studio who will share their perspectives on key global issues. First, we have Dr. Park Won, Professor of North Korean Studies at Ewha Women's University. Welcome to the Roundtable.
Thank you for having me.
We also have Dr. Kim Hana, Professor of International Studies at Sogang University. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
We start our program with one of last week's top stories. North Korea launched a military spy satellite last Tuesday. Now we have an image of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un watching the launch on site. Professor Kim, what do you think leader Kim Jong-un must be thinking?
I think he was feeling relatively happy and relieved because this was the third space satellite that was launched this year, and the first that was relatively more successful. The first one was launched in May, and that failed. The second one was launched in August, and that also failed. And the third one was supposed to be launched in October, but it got delayed. And now that they finally launched it, I think he was relatively relieved.
For the third time?
For the third time, yes.
Depending on the angles of the photos, Kim Jong-un's gray hair is visible on some spots on his head, especially when he is seen from the front. Professor Park, you've been watching Kim Jong-un since he emerged as the next leader of North Korea at the age of 27 in 2011. What do you make of Kim Jong-un with gray hair?
Well, I quote North Korea as theater state. It means that North Korea's every move is a very carefully calculated one. So that's the Kim Jong-un's gray hair has, of course, a certain meaning. And first of all, he's allegedly known that he was born in 1984, but interestingly enough, North Korea has never publicly mentioning about his year to be born. So sooner or later, it's going to be released, this information. But the important thing is that for past entering 12 years in his power, he wanted to be shown as kind of a very experienced leader. Yes, so that's why the gray hair means that relatively young still, they're entering the 40s. So that's a very calculated kind of movement to be shown as the experienced leader to their own people.
I see. Giving the public kind of a confidence in the leadership, right? North Korea claimed to have placed a satellite named 만리경 No. 1 into orbit. It also said the satellite has transmitted to Pyongyang images of U.S. military facilities in Guam. Professor Kim, what can you tell us about this North Korean claim that it succeeded in transmitting the satellite images to the home base?
I think North Korea is trying to send several messages here. Last December, North Korea launched a space satellite which failed, despite claims to have advanced technology. And so because of that, many South Korean experts claimed that North Korea's satellite technology is actually very rudimentary, and that North Korea was making these claims just to show that it has a bit of power. In response to this, Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong-un's sister, sent a response rebutting these claims. But now that it has been relatively more successful, I think it's trying to send a signal to the North Korean civilians that it does have this technology to look into American military facilities. But also, it's also signaling to the US that it can attack if it really wanted to.
And in addition to this claim about taking photographs of the U.S. base in Guam, North Korea also released a report that it also surveyed and took pictures of the 4 military bases inside South Korea, right?
Right, yeah.
But have we seen the photographs, actually?
I have not seen them.
You have not seen them?
I have not seen them.
All right, we have to wait, right? We are looking at a photo of the satellite before the launch. It is horizontally placed on a launching pad for final assembly and fueling process to be completed. This launcher rocket has 4 engines compared to 2 for the previous rockets. Professor Park, judging from the photographs, can you say that North Korea has indeed upgraded the satellite technology?
Well, we are not sure at this moment whether they are really upgrade the satellite itself, but it's pretty clear that the rocket launch is which North Korea called that is using Baekdu engines, and it's a pretty much very powerful engine. But still, we have one puzzle to be solved because North Korea already have many ICBMs. For example, they do have a Hwasong 15 and 17. Right. They have tested these ICBMs for several times. It means that pretty much stable. And some people are even saying that it's ready to deploy it in the field. But this time, they launched this another long-range rocket they called 천리마. It's pretty much different from this previous Hwasong 15 and 17. So it seems to us that why they use this new type of these engines and new type of rocket. And definitely North Korea is trying to, trying to have as many possible as new ICBM. So it's sooner or later, they are going to introduce another type of ICBM other than Hwasong 15, 17, and even Hwasong 18.
I see. There's more reasons to be concerned. Now, let's stay with the puzzle. It is concerning if the military spy satellite launch will be regarded as a successful example of military cooperation between North Korea and Russia in the aftermath of summit meeting between Russia President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. So, professors, I have two questions. Question number one, do you see any Russian fingerprints over the satellite launched by North Korea this time? And second, if this is an example of enhanced military cooperation between the countries, how far does this military cooperation between Russia and North Korea will go? Professor Paul?
The South Korean government, NIS, National Intelligence Service, and also Minister of National Defense, Minister Shin, mentioned that they definitely have some cooperation. Well, bring back to our memory in the September when Kim Jong-un has met the Putin, and Putin is officially mentioned that Russia will help to launch this kind of satellite and explore the space. So definitely there are high possibility of to help with each other. But North Korea and Russia would not have enough time to have a very close cooperation in this particular launch. But it is allegedly known that Russia is helping give some advice because, as Professor Kim mentioned, that North Korea has failed twice. So this time, give us some technical advice. And this is also huge, kind of make an impact to successful this time. And another thing is that this is for the first time Russia is actually helping North Korea in terms of some advanced technology. So this is a kind of huge threat and direct threat to South Korea.
I see. So Kim?
Yes, in addition to what Professor Park said, I think a lot of this will also depend on the progress of the Russian-Ukraine war. South Korea has explicitly shown support for Ukraine, and Russia's probably very unhappy with the situation. And in a way, Russia may be working more closely with North Korea to signal to South Korea that Russia has the ability to threaten South Korea's security by transferring advanced military technology to North Korea. So a lot of this will also depend on the progress of the war as well.
If I add one more thing, this is not just a threat to Korean Peninsula and South Korea, but it's a threat to the overall world as well, because already North Korea has give us some kind of support and supply to ammunition to Russia for the Ukraine war. So we are seeing the kind of evidence that this Ukraine war is directly related to the Korean Peninsula security situation.
There is a country that looks uncomfortable about the North Korea-Russia military cooperation. It is China, a longtime ally of North Korea. The North Korean satellite launch was conducted 6 days after President of the United States and President of China held a summit meeting in San Francisco. Professor Kim, how do you think the Xi Jinping government of China must be thinking of the implications of North Korea's military spy satellite launch?
I think China's not very happy with the situation. The intensification of the geopolitical standoff is not in China's national interests. China is trying to work more closely with the United States and European countries because it's imperative for China's economic development. So in response to that, China doesn't want this intensification between Russia and North Korea, but also The strengthening relations between Russia and North Korea may also indicate that China is losing its traditional influence among the two countries. So China has many reasons to be concerned right now.
First of all, of course, North Korea would love to see China join the club of the military cooperation set by Russia and North Korea. So trilateral security cooperation among Russia, China, and North Korea to cope with the trilateral security cooperation among South Korea, United States, and Japan. How likely is this scenario?
Well, I think China has a very different idea about this so-called trilateral cooperation, because China's the major goal, the ultimate goal is to be a #1 country in these existing systems. But we are seeing that Russia and North Korea, as a revisionist states, they are trying to undermine the existing systems. So-called RBO, rule-based international order, is the respect to sovereignty. Of course, Russia invaded the neighboring sovereign country. And another important principle of the RBO is non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, but North Korea has developed their nuclear weapon for past several decades. So overall, China is very uncomfortable to see this kind of strengthen the relationship, cooperation between Russia and North Korea, as Professor Kim mentioned. So I think China is trying to have some kind of trilateral cooperation. Rather, they are trying to maintain some kind of bilateral cooperation with Russia and also with North Korea separately. But at this moment, we are seeing some kind of evidence and signs that China is not comfortable at all with this kind of enhanced cooperation between Russia and North Korea.
Late last year, Japan released 3 new national security documents and announced plans to increase its defense expenditure from the current level, which is 1% of GDP, to 2% by 2027. Then its defense budget will amount to $67 billion in 2027. First of all, there must be a kind of a chain reactions between North Korea's increasing provocations, like the military spy satellite launch, and Japan responding to those threats.
Yes, definitely. This kind of provocation by North Korea, especially last year, North Korea has launched more than 100 missiles for the first time in their history, the most highest numbers. It can give some kind of a rationale and justification to Japan's military buildup. But not only Japan, but think about the normalization of the relation between South Korea and Japan. If there would be this kind of North Korea's provocation, I think it's very difficult, almost impossible, to normalize the relationship between South Korea and Japan. So, in other sense, the North Korea give another justification and rationale to strengthen the cooperation between Japan and South Korea, even trilateral cooperation between Japan, South Korea, and United States.
I would say that that's very ironical and self-defeating for North Korea.
Yes, definitely. So I said that this Kim Jong-un is some kind of such a huge blunder to not have any kind of dialogue with these countries. Instead, they are continue to develop their missiles and they continue to have this provocation. Definitely, he will encounter more the very serious kind of reaction by other countries.
I see. The day after the North Korean satellite launch, the U.S. U-25 high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft landed at the U.S. Air Base in Osan, Gyeonggi-do Province. The South Korean military stepped up frontline aerial surveillance and operated reconnaissance assets along the military demarcation line, the heavily fortified border with North Korea. First of all, I'd like to get the facts straight first. Who scrapped the agreement first? Was it South Korean government or North Korean government?
We call this agreement so-called CMA, the Comprehensive Military Agreement. When they actually agreed to this inter-Korean military agreement back in year 2018, September, and I think it's definitely a symmetrical agreement because the main purpose to make this kind of agreement is to enhance this kind of, the confidence building between these two countries, at the same time prevent any kind of the intended confrontation or military conflict between these two countries. But for that purpose, I mean, South Korea and North Korea should have a more enhanced the surveillance system with each other. In other words, I mean, South Korea have to see what kind of a military movement in the north. On the other hand, North Korea can see what South Korea's military movement. But definitely, this agreement is very opposite about this kind of confidence building measure. So I said that I argue that this support of, when they are actually agreed, this is a very kind of a weird kind of agreement. This is asymmetrical in a sense that North Korea is can get a far more advantage than South Korea. That's why South Korean government decided to kind of pinpoint to suspend just one clause about this whole agreement.
Not the entire agreement.
Not the entire agreement, but you see the very next day, North Korea said they actually nullified the whole agreement. This is kind of evidence that this is definitely give us some advantage to North Korea.
But regardless of the question who is to blame for the abrogation of the agreement, some people would say that now Korean Peninsula has become more dangerous because there is no agreement.
Well,
and it's South Korea's loss.
Yeah, but I don't agree with that because it doesn't matter whether South Korea kind of suspended this agreement or not. North Korea, they do have their own policy direction. In other words, line. And North Korea introduced December 2019 so-called frontal breakthrough line, and definitely it's a very hostile policy towards South Korea and United States. Since then, North Korea never gave up this kind of provocation for the past couple of years. So this, regardless of this suspension of the CMA, North Korea will continue to have these provocations.
Professor Kim, what do you think? Are we in more bigger danger in the absence of the 2018 military agreement, or are we okay?
So as I mentioned earlier, I think South Korea has been refraining itself from using its reconnaissance activities because it was trying to follow the agreement. And President Yoon has also warned multiple times that he would suspend the agreement if North Korea continued these provocations. I think South Korea will be able to resume its reconnaissance activities and watch North Korea's activities near the demarcation line. Right. And as a result of that, may actually enhance its intellectual capabilities as well.
You have to be able to see in order to prevent accidents.
Right.
That's the argument by the South Korean government. Okay. North Korea's military spy satellite launch will likely have enormous implications for the security conditions on the Korean Peninsula and beyond. There should be effective measures on a global scale to end the dangerous honeymoon between Pyongyang and Moscow. Up next, we are going to check out photos of last week's international headlines. Let's take a look. Last week saw a lot of significant events happening around the world. Professor Park, among those photos, what is most impressive to you?
Well, I think this Hamas, the exchange of the hostages, and that's such a huge issue and very significant issue all over the world. Hopefully, they are going to have another round, several rounds of this exchange and finally release all the hostages.
On a lighter note, my favorite photo among those is the President Biden standing by a turkey in celebration of Thanksgiving, because it's a tradition of the White House to release a turkey, granting an amnesty. Professor Kim, what is your favorite?
So for me, it was the picture of European Council President Charles Michel standing with Ukrainian President Zelensky with a grim look. After visiting Kyiv on November 21st, the European Council chief warned that discussions related to Ukraine's accession to the EU would be a little difficult.
Well, Professor Kim, we can say that since the outbreak of the military conflict between Hamas and Israel in Gaza Strip, the world attention which used to be paid to the war in Ukraine has been literally vanished, which may be really concerning to Ukraine in its fight against Russia. How do you assess the prospect for the war in Ukraine?
So according to analysis by the GDELT, which is the global database for events, language, and tone, which is an analytical project for monitoring press and media reports, news coverage on the war in Ukraine has declined significantly since Hamas made the surprise attack on Israel in early October. So before Hamas's attack took place, Russia's invasion of Ukraine accounted for about 8% of the reports by CNN, but since the attack, it's now less than 1% of the reports.
Russia resumed waves of the drone attacks on Kyiv for the first time in 2 months. First of all, would you say that because the world's attention has been shifted away from Ukraine to the Gaza Strip, do you think President Putin has been emboldened with the prospect of winning the war?
Well, definitely Putin is just simply waiting for this moment because people are losing kind of interest and focus on this Ukraine war. It is true, as Professor Kim mentioned. But still, it's a very complicated issue at this moment because it's kind of entangled with the U.S. presidential election. At this moment, because the Republican Party would not agree to pass the kind of a budget to support not only Ukraine but also Israel too, because for this domestic purpose and of course thinking about the upcoming U.S. presidential election. So overall, this is kind of such a huge challenge to Ukraine, and so we have to focus and we still have to interest in this Ukraine war because this makes such a huge impact on the so-called world order.
On the other hand, Mr. Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, said that the supply of shells and vital artillery ammunition has declined amid the Israel-Hamas conflict. According to the UN Development Program, Ukraine's power generation capacity has fallen to half of its pre-war level with the winter approaching. So, Professor Kim, does it mean that the war is getting tougher for Ukraine?
It definitely does. As Professor Park mentioned, international support has diverted from Ukraine and Russia to Hamas, Israel, in terms of the situations. And because things are getting so much worse for Ukraine, people in Ukraine are also supporting having an armistice much more now than before. In addition to that, because of the instability in the Middle East, energy prices are fluctuating, and Russia's economy is heavily dependent on energy exports, which means that increasing energy prices is going to help Russia's economy, which is then going to create an even more unfavorable situation for Ukraine.
Amid this situation, South Korea's National Intelligence Service said that North Korea has supplied more than 1 million artillery shells to Russia since August. It is 2 months worth of shells for the Russia to carry out the war. So, Professor Park, Russia is indeed involved in the war in Ukraine. How significant, how impactful is it for Russia engaging in the war against Ukraine?
From the Russian perspective, it is very essential to have this kind of ammunition from North Korea. So that's why Vladimir Putin met the Kim Jong-un in last September, and he's showing his wholeheartedly welcoming the Kim Jong-un and these kind of things. So but it does not mean that the Ukraine war is fundamentally changed by the supplying of North Korea's ammunition to Russia. But at least Russia can continue to have this war. So in that sense, it's very essential and very important for Russia.
With these complicated global uncertainties, security concerns are increasing for the Korean Peninsula and beyond. With the prolonged war between Russia and Ukraine, what should South Korea do in terms of devising its diplomatic and military strategy? Professor Park, you first.
Well, this is a very serious and in some sense existential threat to South Korea because we are seeing that Russia and North Korea is very closely cooperate with each other. We just mentioned that the successful satellite launch of North Korea is definitely getting help from the Russia. So we have to stop this kind of cooperation between Russia and North Korea. It's a definitely violation of United Nations Security Councils because any kind of the weaponry of the North Korea to import to outside of North Korea is a definitely violation of the United Nations Security Council. So we have to stop this the cooperation between these two countries with cooperation with the United States, Japan, and even the European countries too.
Professor Kim, any word of advice?
Yeah, I completely agree with Professor Park. I think South Korea needs to closely monitor the situation between Russia and North Korea, especially because Russia may be transferring advanced technology. And in addition to that, during the Camp David summit, President Biden, Prime Minister Kishida, and President Yoon all agreed to continue to support Ukraine and coordinate sanctions against Russia. So hopefully South Korea can use this as leverage in terms of stopping the advanced military technology transfer to North Korea.
Tensions are indeed mounting on many flashpoints in the global stage.
Right.
Professor Kim Hannah, thanks for coming, and Professor Park Won, thanks for coming and sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back to examine new important global issues with you next week. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.